Back in the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company, known as the Volk, Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, became the first Europeans to set foot on Australian soil. Although some believe that Portuguese explorer Cristóvão de Mendonça might have discovered Australia in 1522, the first recorded European landfall was made by a Dutchman named Willem Janszoon in 1606. Now, let's talk about the Volk. It was a massive trading company founded in the Netherlands on March 20, 1602. Imagine this: 6 private East India companies merged into one powerful entity, mainly to compete with the Spanish and Portuguese in the spice trade. The Dutch government granted the Volk a 21-year monopoly over all trade east of the Cape of Good Hope. This move led to Dutch dominance in the Southeast Asian spice market from 1602 to 1670. Spices like nutmeg, mace, pepper, and cloves were incredibly valuable back then. Plus, there was a high demand for porcelain and silk from China and Japan. The Volk became the first multinational corporation with powers that rivaled those of a nation-state. It could maintain an army, wage wars, negotiate treaties, and even establish colonies for the Dutch Republic. By 1637, the Volk was worth a staggering 78 million Dutch guilders, which is about $8.2 trillion today. Before its downfall in 1799, due to corruption and declining profits, the Volk had sent over 4,700 ships to Asia. Most Volk ships headed to the spice trading hubs in the Indonesian archipelago, like the Moluccas and Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, as well as trading posts in Taiwan, Siam, now Thailand, and Tonkin, northern Vietnam. Interestingly, the vast southern landmass known as New Holland, which is now Australia, wasn't really on their radar for trading ventures. And now let's dive deeper into the story of Willem Janszoon, the man who first connected the Dutch East India Company with the Australian continent. On February 26, 1606, Willem Janszoon, a seasoned mariner from Amsterdam, made landfall at Penfather River near modern-day Weipa on the west coast of Cape York Peninsula in northern Queensland. Tasked by the Volk to explore the coast of Nova Guinea, now New Guinea, in search of trading opportunities in gold, Janszoon embarked on this groundbreaking voyage. Janszoon captained the Duifken, which means little dove. He set sail from Bantam on the northeast coast of Java in November 1605, heading first to the K Islands. From there, he navigated along the south coast of New Guinea, charting it as he went. Continuing southeast, he passed the entrance to Torres Strait, the waterway separating the Cape York Peninsula from New Guinea. Interestingly, Janszoon didn't realize it was a strait, leaving its discovery to Spanish mariner Luis Valles de Torres later that same year. As Janszoon reached the Cape York Peninsula, he mistook it for a continuation of southern New Guinea. He mapped about 250 kilometers of coastline from Weipa to Cape Kirwir, which translates to turn again or turn around. As he headed south, Janszoon sailed into Vliege Bay, now known as Albatross Bay, likely named for the troublesome Australian blowflies the crew encountered. Janszoon's exploration marked the beginning of the Dutch charting nearly 2/3 of the Australian coastline throughout the 17th century. Although the official ship log of the voyage no longer exists and Janszoon's original map was lost, a copy known as the Duifken chart was made by the Volk. This map was found in the Austrian National Library in Vienna in 1933, part of the secret atlas of the East India Company, which was only made public in 1670. Dutch cartographer Hessel Juris, who became the official Volk cartographer in 1617, played a crucial role in documenting these voyages. All ship journals, maps, and charts were submitted to him, giving him unprecedented access to Volk archives. Juris's 1620 map, Mar del Sur, Mar Pacifico, authenticated Janszoon's journey and confirmed the existence of Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. The Duifken chart shows Janszoon's landfall at Penfather River, which he named River with the Bush, and Cape Keir, where the Duifken had to turn back after a clash with the indigenous Wik people. This encounter was the first recorded contact between Aboriginal Australians and Europeans. In a skirmish, 9 of the Duifken's 20 crew members were killed. Janszoon reported, 9 of them were killed by the heathens, which are man-eaters, so they were constrained to return, finding no good to be done there. This clash likely resulted from the attempted abduction of indigenous people, as Volk authorities in Batavia had instructed crews to capture locals to learn their languages for trade purposes. The oral histories of Wik elders still recount this early encounter with the Dutch. Unaware that he and his crew were the first Europeans to visit Australian shores, Janszoon followed Volk orders to explore and identify trade opportunities, but found nothing of value. After nearly 4 months at sea, the Duifken returned to the Dutch base at Banda in June 1606. Later, in October 1623, Janszoon was appointed governor of Banda. Despite his significant role, his place in Australian history is often overshadowed by Dirk Hartog's voyage aboard the Indraat. And now let's talk about the Brouwer route and Dirk Hartog, 2 significant elements in the Dutch exploration of Australia. In 1611, Dutch explorer Hendrik Brouwer devised a faster and safer route from Europe to Southeast Asia, bypassing the Portuguese-controlled areas of Malacca in Malaysia and Ternate in Indonesia. By taking advantage of the strong roaring 40s winds across the southern Indian Ocean, Brouwer was able to cut the average voyage time in half, from 12 months to just 6. This new path, known as the Brouwer route, soon became the preferred Dutch route around the Cape of Good Hope to Southeast Asia. However, there was a catch. Without chronometers to accurately calculate longitude, navigational instruments of the time weren't precise. As a result, strong westerly winds sometimes forced Dutch ships off course, or they sailed too far east before turning north. This often led to shipwrecks along the western coast of Australia during the 17th century. It's believed that the Brouwer route was responsible for the Dutch discovering the western part of Australia in 1616. Fast forward a decade from Janszoon's 1606 visit to Australia's northeastern coast. Dutch explorer Dirk Hartog made his mark on history by sailing into Shark Bay on the west coast of Australia, about 850 kilometers north of modern-day Perth. On October 25, 1616, Hartog and his ship, the Indraat, a 700-ton vessel with a crew of 200, made landfall at the northern tip of an island in Shark Bay, which is now known as Dirk Hartog Island. Dirk Hartog, also known as Dirk Hartog or Dirk Hartog, came from a seafaring family. Before joining the Volk, he was a successful private shipping merchant. In 1616, the Volk commissioned him to sail from Texel, an island northwest of the Netherlands, to Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, for a spice trade run. The Indraat was one of 5 ships that left Texel on January 23, 1616, carrying chests full of Dutch guilders. While the Brouwer route wasn't officially enforced by the Volk until 1617, Dutch ships had already started adopting it. They sailed east from the Cape of Good Hope across the ocean for about 1,000 Dutch miles, roughly 7,400 kilometers, before heading north to the Sunda Strait between Java and Sumatra. Historical records aren't clear on whether Hartog was specifically instructed to take the Brouwer route, or if he decided on his own to follow it, as Dutch ship captains could plot their own courses before the route was formally adopted. And now let's delve into the intriguing question: was Dirk Hartog's discovery of the west coast of Australia accidental, or a result of purposeful exploration? This remains an important historical puzzle. Unfortunately, the logs from Hartog's ship, the Indraat, aren't available in the Volk archives. However, Hartog's journal, crew manifest, and notes were submitted back in the Netherlands, as required by the Volk. Using these records, cartographer Hessel Juris created the first chart of Australia's west coast, a project that spanned 10 years from 1618 to 1628. Hartog's landing site was marked, and Indraatsland, one of the earliest names for Australia, was recorded on this chart. Given Hartog's experience as a sailor, it's likely he was aware of the Brouwer route, even though the Vogue hadn't officially endorsed it yet. The senior merchant on the trial, one of the 5 ships in Hartog's fleet, was Pieter de Carpentier, who would later become the 5th Governor-General of the Dutch East Indies. In the VOC's command structure, a senior merchant, or opperkoopman, responsible for the voyage's profitability, ranked higher than a captain. De Carpentier, an advocate for the Brouwer route, had likely influenced Hartog. The Eendrat and the Trouw had both stopped for provisions at the Cape of Good Hope, staying there for 3 weeks in August 1616. Gilles Meebys, the senior merchant on the Eendrat, could also have played a role in this decision. Without definitive historical sources, Hartog's discovery of Australia is often seen as accidental. Hartog spent 3 days exploring the coast and nearby islands, which he found uninhabited. Before departing, he marked the Eendrat's landfall by nailing a flattened pewter plate to a tree. This plate, known as Dirk Hartog's plate, is a well-known artifact now kept at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. The spot where it was nailed is called Cape Inscription, and the inscription is 1616. The 25th of October is here arrived the ship the Eendrat of Amsterdam, the upper merchant, Gilles Meebys of Liege, skipper Dirk Hartog of Amsterdam. The 27 ditto set sail again for Bantam, the junior merchant Jan Stens, the first steersman Pieter Dukes van Bill, anno 1616. 81 years later, in 1697, Dutch captain Willem de Vlaming found Hartog's weathered plate when he landed at Cape Inscription aboard the De Helvink. Recognizing its historical value, he sent the plate to authorities in Batavia. Interestingly, the pewter plate didn't claim the land for the Dutch. It was more of a postal stone, a message left for other ships. After exploring the northern coastline up to Northwest Cape, Hartog charted the area before heading to Bantam. His late arrival in December 1616 had financial repercussions for the Vogue, as he found nothing of commercial value. In December 1617, Hartog left Bantam for the Netherlands with the Eendrat, carrying silk and benzoin, a balsamic resin used in medicine. By 1618, Hartog was in the service of Elias Tripp, a Vogue director, and Jacques Nisquet, a merchant and art collector. He sailed to the Adriatic Sea and helped defend Venice against the Spanish Habsburgs before returning home, where he died in 1621 at the age of 40. Following the explorations of Janszoon and Hartog, numerous Dutch ships continued to chart the northern, southern, and western coastlines of Australia, mapping around 4,000 kilometers by 1,628. In 1619, Frederick de Houtman charted the Abrolhos Islands off the coast of Western Australia. In 1627, Pieter Nuys, who later became the Dutch ambassador to Japan, entered the Great Australian Bight and charted what is now Nuys Archipelago in South Australia. However, many Vogue ships were wrecked on reefs due to the roaring 40s winds. For instance, in 1628, monsoonal winds drove the Vinan down the Pilbara coast and Barrow Island region. Before Captain James Cook's famous 1770 voyage, 54 European ships had sailed into Australian waters, with 42 of them being Vogue ships. This might suggest a deliberate exploration effort by the Vogue, but their primary focus was on profitable trade rather than settlement. The lucrative spice trade led to the establishment of trading posts throughout Southeast Asia, but Australia, offering no such rewards, didn't see the same interest from the Vogue. Abel Janszoon Tasman's voyages in 1642 furthered the Dutch exploration of Australia. Using the VOC's secret atlas, Tasman charted much of the western coast before discovering Van Diemen's Land, now Tasmania. Tasman's chief pilot decided to sail eastward from Mauritius on the 44th parallel, leading to their landfall in November 1642. They named the island Anthony van Diemen's Land in honor of the Governor-General of the Dutch East Indies, Anthony van Diemen. Tasman was instructed to seek out commodities and gauge the presence of precious metals, pretending to value other minerals more highly. The VOC's exploration of Australia was driven by a desire for geographic knowledge and shorter routes to the riches of South America. The last VOC ship sent to Australia, the Ridgeder and the Biz in 1756, explored the Gulf of Carpentaria. Despite their significant contributions to charting Australia's coasts, the VOC's lack of systematic exploration meant their focus remained on more immediately profitable ventures in Southeast Asia. And now we delve into an intriguing aspect of Dutch exploration, the marooning of VOC sailors along the Western Australian coastline. Remarkably, around 200 people were left stranded when their ships, navigating the Brouwer route, were wrecked or forced ashore. Indigenous oral histories even suggest that these Europeans integrated with local tribes, marking the first permanent European presence in Australia. The idea of Dutch colonies arising from these marooned sailors remains a matter of conjecture. The first documented case occurred in 1629 with the mutiny and shipwreck of the Batavia. This VOC ship, en route to Batavia, struck Morning Reef in the Abrolhos Islands. Of the 320 people on board, about 275 survived the initial wreck and made it to nearby islands. However, a mutiny led to the brutal murder of 125 survivors. When a rescue ship, the Sardam, arrived, the mutineers were left as punishment at Whitcara Gully near Coberry, Western Australia. In 2015, 4 skeletons, including one headless, were found on Beacon Island, believed to be among the survivors of the Batavia. Another significant stranding occurred in 1656 when the Vergolda drag, bound for Batavia, wrecked off Ledge Point, north of Perth, leaving 68 sailors stranded. These incidents hint at a Dutch influence on indigenous peoples. Stories and physical evidence suggest Aboriginal people with European features and light or reddish hair, and local languages incorporating Dutch-sounding words. The name, Arnhem, as in Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory, derives from the VOC vessel Arnhem, which explored the Gulf of Carpentaria in 1623. Arnhem is also a city in the Netherlands. In 1834, the Perth Gazette reported Aboriginals encountering a group of white people inland of the Swan River, allegedly descendants of VOC mariners. While intriguing, this story, along with the idea of established Dutch colonies, remains speculative. Captain James Cook's 1770 landing in Botany Bay has largely overshadowed these earlier Dutch ventures. Yet, before Cook began to outline the eastern coast of Australia, Dutch explorers had already charted more than half of its coastline. Despite their significant early presence, the VOC's focus remained on profitable trade routes and not on establishing permanent settlements in Australia. This nuanced history highlights the complex and often overlooked contributions of Dutch explorers to the mapping and understanding of the Australian continent.